Norman, I happen to know that you spent the night in a house in Toronto the other night, a house that's supposed to be haunted.
Right. You know, Ken, most of your haunted house stories have humorous connotations. This one really doesn't, although it does have all the characteristics of a classic ghost yarn. Right down to the nearby graveyard, the crowds who think the whole thing is screamingly funny every day and every night since the story broke. But inside, it's a story of a family terrified by night and harassed all the time. The Hawkins family and their 2 children.
Yesterday, upon the stair, I met a man who wasn't there. He wasn't there again today. I wish he'd go away. But when I came home last night at 3, the man was waiting there for me. But when I looked around the hall, I couldn't see him there at all. Oh, go away, don't come back anymore. Go away, and please don't slam that door.
What? She isn't gone.
In the hearts and minds of many Magic players cut from a certain cloth, Innistrad is a home away from home. Ravnica, with its myriad spires and tangled alleyways, certainly competes for the claim, as does Dominaria, with its colossal continents that stretch across its world map, like those of the high fantasy novels from which it drew inspiration. Lorwyn and Kamigawa, and Amonkhet and Theros all have their draw, but Innistrad lives in its own category of places. It feels removed from the discussion, like a brooding cousin who sits withdrawn from the dinner table, while the rest of the family bickers over platitudes. Perhaps we can begin with an exercise in imagination. Close your eyes, if you will, and picture the woodlands bordering the province of Kessig. In the distance, the sun is setting and casting a brilliant orange through the dying leaves. The smell of oak is carried with a chilly breeze that brushes up against your cheek. Night will soon fall, and you know better than to be stuck out here in the woods, alone. You quicken your step. You must return swiftly to town before darkness beats you there. At your back echo the howls of a wolf, a terrible portent. Something follows. This anxiety of being watched, stalked, and hunted is the familiar fear that permeates this plane. It is a fear that I find comforting. Tonight we will watch together The Horror of Innistrad, a video I wrote a few autumns ago to welcome in the changing energies that accompany October, my favorite month. At that time, in 2021, we were embarking on our 3rd visit to this Gothic plane, and I sensed that each approach had remarkably different aesthetic and narrative intentions. The guiding question that informed my analysis was this: what horrors are home in the home of horrors? Upon rewatching this video in preparation for this evening's discussion, I asked myself a different question. What horrors are no longer at home here? And where have they gone instead? Some, I anticipate, have moved into a different haunted house, one infested by moths. Innistrad marks a pivotal point in the history of Magic and its world building. Against recent expansions, it feels dark, mature, and intentional. It saw the heights of the 3-set block storytelling model and eclipsed them. It is expertly crafted and bereft of cheap gimmicks. It cares about its mood and its themes, and it possesses more than a few illustrations that would scare off art directors of the current era. Who would have the courage nowadays to commission claustrophobia and blood artist and sensory deprivation? Ovidio Cartagena might, but would they let him? It sounds strange to say, but the entire card file feels very organic. The work of John Stanko and an ascending Ryan Pancoast realizes these humans and renders their flesh, blood, and bone in remarkable detail. Remember that the denizens here are nothing more than food to satiate the cravings of just about every other creature on the plane, alive and undead. Innistrad is constantly eating itself. Food at this moment in development was not yet imagined as a token or a game piece. Eldraine brought that technology in October of 2019, and Eldraine is a useful counterbalance against which we can measure Innistrad's thematic power. Eldraine, to me, is the watered-down extension of Disney's interpretation of the Arthurian legends and the Grimm fairy tales, the latter of which were the sterilized composite of the folk stories from Germany's poor and disenfranchised people. Eldraine is cute and safe and full of whimsy. It had a silly trailer with gingerbread people, a cousin of which we would eventually eat in Premier Draft on Arena. Gingerbrute, if you recall, has the subtype food. But food is a deadly serious omen in those original stories. Hansel and Gretel, as I explored in my video on Curious Pear, is a horrifying parable of starvation and abandonment. It alludes to the real strife and tremendous suffering that the early 19th century Germans were forced to endure. I can't help but wonder what that story may have looked like if it were told on Innistrad, a plane based on the same regions in Europe. Imagine the horror of sending 2 children into the woods to fend for themselves, lest they starve at home or become food themselves. The Gothic, and by extension Innistrad, is concerned with this ugly and vicious side of human life. Every monster here symbolizes some darkness lurking within us, and all have their origins in a deep literary and cinematic tradition. Vampires, werewolves, doppelgangers, priests, zombies, ghosts, cultists, mobs, demons, and humans, all of them call Innistrad their home. The second visit to the plane brought the uncanny and inconceivable cosmic terrors in the Eldrazi. At the time, I didn't like this invasion very much, as I express in the video. It seemed antithetical to what made Innistrad feel so real. In retrospect, I am more forgiving of this experiment. It is conceptually awesome to see Emrakul's influence bleed throughout every living entity on the plane, even if I still attest that these monsters come from a totally different century of thought. And before you ask, no, I have not played Bloodborne. I also put forth in this video that Magic takes itself very seriously. It certainly used to, and many of those complaining during this era argued that the game was too dreary and too dreadful. You don't know what you have until it's gone. Midnight Hunt and Crimson Vow, upon closer inspection, already hinted at what was soon to come with Project Booster Fun. The frame treatments and alternate illustrations certainly captured the charm of this plane to some extent, but the superficial flyby approach to world building that is so pervasive nowadays never lets you really sink your teeth into anything. You know, really get a good taste for the iron in the veins flowing beneath the surface. The world building of today is full of snacks, but rarely does it offer a complete, living, breathing, terrified meal. Is anyone else getting hungry? Might just be me. No, we could not print Innistrad today. There would be no allegories, only illusions. There would be appearances from movie monsters by name and by brand, and there would be reskins, and there would be references, and there would be tie-ins, and it would all be very tame and very safe and very approved by the executives. The Innistrad of today would be too scared to kill angels and desecrate corpses and bury people alive. Never would they rip the face off a villager to expose the skeleton beneath, eyes and tongue still intact. Never would they hire Winona Nelson to paint the freshly disemboweled victim of night. Far too much blood and guts. The company now would be too afraid of the monster they once proudly made. I feel like I've heard that story before. Tonight, we will return to Innistrad, and it just so happens that the moon is full. As the haunted hands of Chopin float above a distant grand piano, we will relish in one of magic's greatest artistic and thematic expansions and achievements. In doing so, we will sit down to a meal with death incarnate, famished for nutrients and rabid for a morsel of replenishment. Before gnawing away at the first bite, we will open our mouths, briefly, and we will smile. Please enjoy. Shortly after arriving in Vienna in November of 1830, the Polish pianist and composer Frédéric Chopin wrote a letter to his eldest sister Ludwika. Accompanying the letter was a musical dedication, a short piece in C-sharp minor in the style of a nocturne. This piece, like all of Chopin's nocturnes, was inspired by the night. The haunting melody of the right hand drifts around the broken chord shapes of the left, like moonlight seeping through the dead trees. Even at only 20 years old, Chopin was terrified of leaving his home in Warsaw and dying alone in exile. When he finally mustered the courage to travel, he was celebrated with a farewell by family and friends at the gates of Wola. But a month after his departure, an uprising erupted at home against Russia. Chopin spent that Christmas alone in Vienna, wishing desperately he could help his countrymen, confessing in a letter to his best friend, "Behind me a tomb, beneath me a tomb, only above me was no tomb to be found." But night always becomes day. Listen as the sun comes out, right here. Romantics like Chopin, like the poet Giacomo Leopardi, who spent his short sick life gazing at the moon from his window in the seaside town of Recanati, like Caspar David Friedrich, whose paintings illustrate the movement better than words ever could, they were awestruck by nature's limitless power. They chased the sublime, they swayed with the waters of their temperamental hearts, they championed aesthetic beauty in all artistic expression. As William Wordsworth claimed in Lyrical Ballads, poetry should begin as the, quote, spontaneous overflow of powerful feelings, end quote. Alongside Wordsworth in this collection was Samuel Taylor Coleridge's longest work, The Rime of the Ancient Mariner, illustrated here by wood engraver Gustave Doré, another romantic artist himself. In sum, Romanticism states that all power derives from profound human emotion. The moon, an eternal muse of the Romantics, embodies such power. But, in time, elation turns to melancholy and grandeur proves illusory. Chopin once more sets the sun, and the night settles in again. Beneath this European wave of Romanticism swelled a darker, more tragic, more macabre undercurrent. This is the Gothic, an antiquated term that Giorgio Vasari used as a pejorative to describe the architectural style of German and French medieval churches. The Gothic in literature was born in the 18th century with Horace Walpole's The Castle of Otranto. It flourished into the 19th century with Mary Shelley's Frankenstein and Emily Bronte's Wuthering Heights. and solidified its immortality with the publication of Bram Stoker's Dracula in 1897, a text that cannot die. Sewn together to the Gothic is its appendage, horror, from the Latin to tremble. Gothic horror imitates its emotional brother Romanticism, but remains transfixed with fear. And fear can't be explained away with logic, with rationale or diagrams or the empirical. Fear is dyed-in-the-wool emotion. Fear, argues the Gothic, is terribly human. Gothic horror invites us to befriend fear, to succumb to its fatal attraction, to sit down to a warm meal with death incarnate and smile. Ten years ago, at the end of September 2011, Magic players all around the world were welcomed to the plane of Innistrad for the first time. Marketed with the tagline "Horror Lurks Within," Innistrad promised a world designed top-down from the terrific tropes and narrative beats of Gothic fiction. As senior game designer on Magic's creative team, James Wyatt writes, "On the world of Innistrad, horrors stalk in the shadows and scratch at the door in the night. Humanity is beset on all sides. Vampires thirst for human blood, werewolves live for the thrill of the hunt, the restless spirits of the dead haunt the living, and no corpse is safe from reanimation at the hands of cruel necromancers or cunning scientists. Only their grim determination and their staunch faith in the protection of their patron archangel, Avacyn, allows humans to survive in this nightmarish realm." Much like the sprawling cityscape of Ravnica, Innistrad draws from the flora and fauna of Northern Europe to fill out its landscapes. But unlike Ravnica, and much more like Theros and Eldraine, this setting is pastoral. It is pre-industrial, relying on raw materials, merchant trade, and human labor to survive. Geographically, Innistrad is divided into 4 major regions. Off the icy waters of the port towns of Nephalia, black market economies thrive on corpse smuggling and criminal movement to facilitate growth. Even the most resolute followers of law and order acknowledge Nephalia's underground trading arteries as a necessary evil, and the thick mist rolling in from the sea ensures all crime remains unseen. The town's buildings are made of wood, a decree enforced by the vampire Runo Stromkirk to guarantee the safety of his progenies. It is difficult to carve stakes, he argues, if all the nearby forests have been razed. In Kessig, however, the woodlands are thriving. Ensnared in a perpetual autumn, the denizens here become hunters and trappers, farmers and humble villagers. But they too have their own secrets to hide. Inflicted with the curse of lycanthropy are commoners and mayors alike, their nature revealed at the first glimpse of moonlight. Those who detest the curse are called repentants, but the wantons who embrace their duality harness this inhuman rage and form howl packs with fellow werewolves. Mechanically, werewolves were a huge innovation. To make them work, R&D borrowed design and printing tech from another game in Wizards of the Coast's arsenal called Duel Masters, which featured cards with 2 faces. Initially, Aaron Forsyth and the team were hesitant to print cards without the iconic Deckmaster back, but after playtesting, it became clear that the gameplay was too rich to ignore. The risk paid off tenfold. Its success is still felt 10 years later, and Innistrad's depth remains indebted to these cards that transform. Transformation is fundamental to Gothic horror. The tension between human and monster marks the dramatic center of these stories. Often, however, the dichotomy dissolves, revealing that the human is the monster. Unlike in fairy tales and bedtime stories where heroes and enemy beasts are visually and morally opposed, the Gothic suggests that, without proper emotional control or physical defenses, you too can become one of them. And this is the locus of fear in both character and reader. Frightening is the thought of being involuntarily bitten by a wayward wolf, unknowing if the curse has been passed until a full moon's night. Even more unnerving is being held captive by the beast, a total relinquishment of control. The journal of Jonathan Harker that opens the novel of Dracula is a Gothic horror miniature. Harker's imprisonment is particularly dreadful because all the while he suffers, the Count hovers around the castle, seductively playing with his food. Werewolves and vampires both embody the transformation from human to monster, but they symbolize differing emotional extremes. Returning to Wyatt, if werewolves are a symbol of repressed rage, vampires are a symbol of repressed desire. Innistrad's vampires find home in the harrowing region of Stensia, described as a mountainous valley of jagged hills dotted with Victorian manors. Here, the sun never seems to break through the strangely colored clouds, a description reminiscent of the pages of Stoker's novel. On Innistrad, 4 vampire families skirmish for dominance. Atop the hierarchy are the Markov, the most ubiquitous and prestigious. They utilize psychic magic to impose their volition. The Falconwrath bloodline originates from a falconer, and thus they can fly. They are the vainest of the vampires. The Voldaren, conversely, are the most hermetic and antisocial of the clans, opting to disguise themselves by transforming into animals. But homebodies, as we know, are often the hosts of the best house parties. The trope of the vampire ball reappears throughout Innistrad, and especially on Olivia's first card. Finally, the Stromkirk, who roam the shores and streets of Nephalia. Their affinity with the coast allows them to disappear at will into the haunting blue mist. This piece by James Ryman highlights the self-assuredness with which the vampires roam Innistrad. As an aside, how strange is it to see a man behind the noble donned in a mask? How differently an image can read 10 years removed from its conception. In browsing the first Innistrad block for this retrospective, I found myself returning to this card over and over again. It is a gem of visual design. The illustration by Winona Nelson radiates with opulence and sophisticated fashion, and the colors both within the painting and in the surrounding card frame align with our collective imagination of vampires. Red and black is the dominating motif, which is complemented by a deathly white in the lacy garments and on the cold skin. In the commons live the fruits of world building, and this innocuous game piece captures the essence of Innistrad's vampires in full. The fourth and final region of this plane is Gavony, home of the humans. Among the most enduring images from the first set, one that many players must remember is this piece by Peter Moorbacher. I love this painting because it places us undoubtedly on Innistrad. It could never be confused for any other plane. In Mike Linneman's article Architecture on Innistrad, we learn that Gavony Township is a half-timbered house, which was a cheap building method consisting of vertical, diagonal, and horizontal laminated timber beams filled with adobe, stone, brick, wood, or plaster. Such houses still stand among the streets of Germany today, which connects this fantasy world to its living geographic counterpart. Employed in this painting too is Innistrad's primary visual gag. Art director Jeremy Jarvis notes that the first-person camera is established across the world to deliver a sense of personal dread. The township here is disproportionately exaggerated, with its base widened as its roof sharpened to a tiny point in the sky. The effect is unnerving and imposing, leaving you suspicious of this supposedly safe space in a world that is actively hunting you. Johannes Voss's iconic image of Blood Artist utilizes this upward-gazing first-person camera to similar effect, which invites viewers into the scene as a proxy for the suffering victim. As Noel Carroll argues in the article The Nature of Horror, horror appears to be one of those genres in which, ideally, the emotive responses of the audience run parallel to the emotions of characters. Indeed, in works of horror, the responses of characters often seem to cue the emotional responses of the audience. This marks another distinctly Gothic element of Innistrad's horror. Here, humanity is the symbol of hope, but the humans are terrified, and by extension so are the players. In life, the humans of Innistrad are nothing more than fancy cattle to the vampires, who maintain their populations like livestock. They see themselves humanity's saviors, yet despise their dependence on human blood. In life, the humans build fortifications against rampant werewolves, unknowing that the disease already secretly lives among their ranks. In life, the humans build churches to seek safety through that which is holy, but within the clergy run corrupt bishops and priests who actively call forth demons living beneath the chapels. Even in death, the humans are not at rest. Corpses of the deceased on Innistrad often return in ranks to walk among the living, or they are dismembered and mutilated in experiments by the Scabarin, mad scientists obsessed with necromantic reanimation. The spirits of the dead are also just as vulnerable to the horror. Ghosts return to haunt the living, some unknowingly become the specter of the ones they loved most in life. The Geists of Innistrad, which is the German term for ghost, thus pairing the fiction to its real-world equivalent once again, are fundamentally connected to the Gothic. Like werewolves and vampires, they illustrate the transformation from human to monster. They also reflect the plane's total dependence on superstition as means of explaining unnatural phenomena.
Much Gothic fiction brings us into contact with the supernatural. We may live our lives professing that we don't believe in the supernatural. We may live our lives never being really convinced that we've seen a ghost. On the other hand, our dreams remind us all the time that there are things that we see, even when asleep, which are very hard to explain. There is no culture in the world which is free from ghosts, or from the fear of ghosts, or from the belief in ghosts, and there never has been.
So common are the Geists that not even death promises an escape from the terror. An afterlife afforded to only the most noble of Innistrad's citizens is called the Blessed Sleep, a tranquil oblivion in which neither body nor spirit return in any form to the world. But as the Nebelgast proves, the breath of the sleepless that rolls in with the tide and brings Geists to Nephalia, this fate is a rare occurrence. Enhancing the human's belief in superstition is the omnipresence of the moon. As stated prior, the Romantic moon and the Gothic moon differ primarily in their connotations. Romanticism used the moon's splendor as a symbol of profound emotion. The Gothic sees the moon as a lingering warning, a sign of a malicious presence. When the moon is new on Innistrad, babies have a better chance at the blessed sleep. Conversely, an increase in werewolf attacks marks the presence of the so-called hunter's moon. Many astronomers on the plane believe that the moon is made of silver. If so, the werewolves' greatest boon is also their greatest bane. This is the essence of the Gothic, and the moon represents its central theme of horrific transformation. And like the humans, the moon is itself capable of transforming. As it waxes and wanes through its phases, so does the superstition-driven behavior of the citizens. And so this extremely rich and grounded immersive experience distinguishes the world of Innistrad from other worlds in Magic. This immersion, I think, is due to the hyper-focus on humans as both the victims of a relentless multi-front hunt and their presence at the core of the monsters hunting them. All the world-building elements, from the pointed art direction to mechanical minutiae, like equipment getting better if a human holds it, or spells benefiting from the presence of death, aided in this feeling. As proxies for the players, the humans' fear invited us to be afraid too. The narrative arc acknowledged that it had to get worse before it got better. And despite all odds, humanity prevailed. Innistrad's first story was one of humans resisting humanoid monsters, a fundamentally Gothic tale of the grappling between the darkness and the light. And then... 5 years later, the Eldrazi invaded Innistrad and twisted all of these relationships. Usurping the balance between humans and monsters was an entirely alien entity, a cosmic horror from the blind eternities, the promised end in all her tentacular glory. Shadows over Innistrad debuted in April 2016, its title reminiscent of the Lovecraft source material from which it drew. Emrakul's arrival on Innistrad was teased in this set. Across the plane, her influence was felt in the bodies of its citizens and in the clouds of the sky. Her presence displaced the moral center of the plane's most stalwart protectors and altered the texture of what made Innistrad horrible. Alongside her arrived the Gatewatch, Magic's ragtag version of the Avengers, a group of pseudo-superheroes who placed their nagging differences aside to save the world. And suddenly, Innistrad needed a lot of saving. As I often do, I turn to the basic land suite for guidance and insight into the state of world building during this era. Together with the decrepit and warped symbol of Avacyn, all 5 basic lands feature this monument, a stone formation resembling an anvil or the head of a sliver. Called cryptoliths, these structures quite literally pointed to the mystery that needed solving. They also symbolically pointed to a shift away from the Gothic as the primary mood of storytelling. No longer would minor quarrels between vampires and geists and werewolves and humans instigate fear. Now there were bigger fish to fry. If the first block's visual gag was a first-person point of view that invited players to identify with victims, Shadows over Innistrad and Eldritch Moon's primary visual gag was to showcase gory and unnatural mutations of the body due to Emrakul's arrival. With restraint, this concept could still fit the tone and atmosphere that makes Innistrad so charming. In excess, however, it can nullify the rules that make the world immersive, like going through a haunted house with all the lights on. Consider Matt Stewart's illustration for Manic Scribe. From the Victorian-era costuming to the arched window panes, whose fluid shapes mirror the waxy candles burning alongside the demented scholar, this scene, like Gavany Township, undeniably takes place on Innistrad. Upon closer observation, we see the quills are pierced through the scribe's palms, and both their pinky fingers are curling ever so slightly as they scribble nonsense onto the parchment that litters the entire office. The catatonic stare, the mouth agape, the eyes lifeless and petrified sell the horror in this piece, and the tentacled digits are just subtle enough that they don't distract from the composition. Conversely, Voldaren Pariah and especially their transformed side Abolisher of Bloodlines mark the full departure into the theater of excess. Making literal the title Eldritch Moon, we see a vampire completely morph into an Eldrazi monstrosity, growing extra limbs and tentacles and animal maws and claws, all while bathed in the light of the full moon. Notably, their silhouette mimics that of Emrakul herself. It is a smart and grotesque composition, a delightful exhibition of unnatural body horror. But with this shift in art direction came the concession of turning on the lights in the haunted house. Conceptually, cosmic horror and Gothic horror operate on separate axes. Gothic horror is anthropocentric in nature. It is fundamentally concerned with the darkness living within human beings. Doppelgangers make manifest these inner battles and represent the sublime's evil twin, what Freud and others called the uncanny. The case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde explores this idea, and notably the transformed monster still resembles the man, even if his physique is exaggerated. The Gothic is obsessed with superstition, in religion and in the occult. It is distrustful of scientific explanation, since the monsters will always defy any and all rational explanation. The existence of ghosts or the Headless Horseman or Count Dracula is not a matter of belief. Gothic protagonists understand that such evils are woven into the fabric of the world. And to defeat them, you must play by the same rules. Smelting silver bullets and conducting seances and decapitating the zombie at the neck all utilize the same logic that formed the monsters in the first place. Staying inside during a full moon or avoiding patterns of the number 13 are not signs of paranoia. They are tactics of the wise, and the Gothic rewards such behavior. In contrast, the cosmic horror of Lovecraft and the like are completely anti-anthropocentric. Often, these stories lean into the ineffable to emphasize the minuteness of human life against the unimaginably large scale of time and space. Cosmic horror is heavily informed by scientific technologies. The monsters are not symbolic of human emotions, but rather could read as the devastating consequences of hubris or the total indifference of the universe with regards to earthly affairs. Invisible horrors like the untamable radioactivity of Chernobyl or the unreachable Mariana Trench are comfortably at home in the tales of this genre. If the Gothic cares about how our moon affects human behavior, the Cosmic argues that this moon is just one moon among many moons in a solar system rotating around an average star among billions, none of which are even aware of your bad luck on an arbitrary Tuesday afternoon. If the Gothic is a distinctly pre-industrial product of the 19th century, then the Cosmic is reflective of the 20th century's gigantic and dehumanizing leaps in industry and technology. During our second visit to Innistrad in 2016, I found myself asking, what horrors are at home in the home of horrors? Why was there such dissonance between this setting that enamored so many players a few years prior, and the invasion of a new race of monsters that were horrific in their own right, and thus theoretically could meld seamlessly into this environment? Never mind the Gatewatch, a gimmicky cliche in an IP that takes itself very seriously, and doesn't need monochromatic characters to push its narratives. Why didn't Shadows over Innistrad and Eldritch Moon deliver on the tremendous successes of their former selves? Because in looking again at all the cards, there are just so many awesome designs here. Perhaps I'm misremembering. I mean, look at Shamble Back and Relentless Dead and From Under the Floorboards. These are the blackest of midnight black cards. There's nothing cosmic about them. The vampires, too, look excellent. Insolent Neonate and Era Falconwrath both capture that high-class maliciousness and vampiric disregard for the rules. Startled Awake and Persistent Nightmare is an inspired design, one that took the transform mechanic into completely new space. And just look at the way Village Messenger flips, man, it practically jumps out of the card frame. Even the Red Angels are terrific, with Gold Knight Castigator being one of my all-time favorites of the tribe. In Shadows over Innistrad, the moody, atmospheric Gothic darkness is still prolific on so many cards. Even some of Eldritch Moon's Eldrazi hybrids are stellar. Svetlin Velenov's Decimator of the Provinces is a painting that has persisted in my memory of this set. The mangled deformities of the boar are reminiscent of nuclear waste's affect on organic life, and those vibrant and warm autumnal oranges contrast the nightmarish creature in a beautiful way. Fibrous Entangler by Stephen Belladin is another horrific display of body mutation. You can practically hear the bones cracking as they stretch and turn, the tentacles squishing as they writhe around the howling face of the distorted werewolf. Once again, the lights are on in the haunted house, but certain horrors can still frighten even while on full display. And aside from the standout paintings and pet cards, players still consider Eldritch Moon Limited to be one of the most engaging draft formats in the game's history.
So this is a main phase. Ping you with the Thermo Alchemist, play Make Mischief. Ping you again, Galvanic Bombardment, the Devil. Shoot you with the Devil, attack with the Castigator. So,
that
okay.
was cool.
After all, Brock did assemble lethal on that same turn.
But then I come back to Emrakul the Promised End, and I remember why Cosmic and Gothic horrors clash. This image is a phenomenal composition. The alien's gigantic size is set to scale as she hovers behind a town square, her tentacles pouring down and swallowing the buildings below. Beneath her, an all-out war wages between the humans and their corrupted counterparts. Silhouettes of axes and pikes remind us of the state of technology on the plane, and furthermore emphasize that this battle is one of the common folk. Fires are ablaze, black smoke is rising, a full moon glows behind a colossal cosmic abomination in the distance. Oh, the futility. This painting underscores the humans of Innistrad's total irrelevance. Not only are they caught fighting between one another, but even if they banded together, how could they ever stop such a force? How could they stand a chance against such an inhuman entity while myriad other monsters prey upon their ilk? Just as much at the level of gameplay, the appearance of Emrakul the Promised End represented the total loss of all hope.
But here comes Emrakul for Sam Pardee, and the fun is about to start here. Let's see what devastation Sam Pardee can bring to Andrew Brown's side of the battlefield. Picks up a card from Nissa and a card from his draw step, and now we'll see what Andrew does with this extra turn here in the face of Sam Pardee's Emrakul. Just a pair of lands, and that'll be a scoop for Andrew Brown. So Emrakul does it there for Sam Pardee in incredible fashion.
Eldritch Moon arrived in July 2016 following a string of doom and gloom magic blocks. The Eldrazi sense of omnipotence was exhausted in the 2 sets prior on Zendikar, and their arrival on Innistrad felt like mixing steak and potatoes with octopus and lionfish. Of course, you want your invasive species to feel out of place on the worlds they are seeking to conquer, but again, with their arrival, the keystone that kept the belief suspended was yanked out from beneath the narrative structures it upheld. So, in a poetic return to form, when the Gatewatch trapped Emrakul in the moon, they simultaneously re-established the rules that made the world so rich and believable and grounded in the first place. It was a symbolic gesture that dismissed the cosmic and returned us to the earthly land of superstition. The Gothic moon rose once again. And this painting persists. It feels like a movie poster, doesn't it? An image you'd see framed in a light box behind the kiosk at the local cinema. In returning to the question, what horrors are at home in the home of horrors, I realized that alongside the Gothic and the cosmic, Innistrad has always been informed and influenced by the silver screen. Cinematic horrors crept into the card frames in 2011 and nestled in alongside the monsters of Gothic literature. This continued with Shadows and Eldritch Moon, and now, with our third visit to the plane, Innistrad is, once again, going to the movies.
Hey, you're all right. I'm looking at you. I can tell you're okay. What are we waiting for? Let's do it.
In the 1986 sci-fi horror film The Fly, David Cronenberg slowly turns the beautiful, athletic, and smart but goofy 34-year-old Jeff Goldblum into a repulsive and decaying creature who cannot leave his house. As the title suggests, he slowly becomes a fly. We see his story told on Delver of Secrets. 12 years prior, Tobe Hooper took a group of rowdy miscreants and a lo-fi film camera out to the hill country near Austin, Texas, and set up one of the most iconic and culty slashers in the genre's history. I can't help but see Leatherface in Volkan Baga's painting here, the butcher's undead eyes staring gloomily past the fourth wall and directly into us. Village Cannibals, despite predating Ari Aster's filmic debut, has me remembering the horrific climax of 2018's Hereditary. The wooden beams and stoic faces lit from below feel eerily similar to the attic and treehouse scenes in the film's third act. And who could forget Linda Blair's timeless performance in The Exorcist, whose stunts put her in various contraptions and harnesses and caused unrepairable damage to her spine. The floating girl in ghostly possession takes me back to this film from 1973 and has me wishing I could have seen this one in theaters myself. The Easter eggs and subtle references to horror films and monster movies are abundant throughout the first 2 Innistrad blocks, but with the third visit, the creative and marketing teams leaned in further to pop culture's knowledge of cinema to build Midnight Hunt and Crimson Vow. Tapping at the Window, for example, captures that childhood fear of inventing threats out of shaking trees caught in a thunderstorm, but it also points back to 1982's Poltergeist, in which Robbie is actually kidnapped by the possessed oak in his backyard lawn. The Meat Hook Massacre makes explicit reference to that Texas Chainsaw one. The hand hanging in the foreground provides a hint of what the butcher is chopping up behind it. Even Delver of Secrets received a reprinting here. Of course, Join the Dance, Raise the Effigy, and the entire Coven mechanic are nods to the witchy folk horror classics of the 60s and 70s, as well as Ari Aster's sophomore effort in Midsummer. Add to the list This Forest by Andreas Rocha, which may be a call-out to the Tree of the Dead from which the Headless Horseman emerges in Sleepy Hollow from 1999. Tim Burton's efforts are masterful in this film. Its colors and textures and ghostly atmosphere feel like Innistrad living in live action. Other gags like Rise of the Ants and Shadow Beast sighting bring a little bit of campy humor to the fold, which is always welcomed. Comedy is ingrained in horror. Comedy provides some comfort and relief to the grim nature of the haunted house. Even more fun when the haunted house that's trying to kill you hits you with a couple of puns on the way out the door. Midnight Hunt's premier full-art basic lands were printed in black and white. They are reminiscent of Gustave Doré's engravings, invoking the spirit of the Romantics once more, perhaps none more effectively than Evan Kegel's Island here. To me, they also capture the essence of black and white horror films. The Invisible Man, Frankenstein, The Wolfman with Lon Chaney Jr., even later classics like Alfred Hitchcock's Psycho and George A. Romero's Night of the Living Dead. All of these films leverage their black and white film stock to develop atmosphere and mood. And it's curious to me that some of history's earliest feature-length films, when cameras were primitive and materials costly, focused on horrific subject matter and terrifying stories to tell. I mentioned Nosferatu at the beginning, of course, but even The Passion of Joan of Arc from 1928 and L'Inferno from 1911 are frightening and heavy works of filmmaking. This mountain reminds me a bit of the latter's film set. As we move into another autumn, I find myself feeling at home now more than ever on Innistrad. Just as much as Ravnica, if not more, I see this plane as magic's tonal center, a darker world that synthesizes the Gothic with the cinematic and still makes room for high fantasy, a world that is at its best when its humans are in mortal danger. Despite the lack of Eldrazi presence this time, I appreciate that the citizens still remember the chaos and onslaught that Emrakul brought to the plane. Commonly referred to as the Travails, the events of Eldritch Moon still haunt and linger over those who survived. Dennick, Pious Apprentice's story is particularly tragic. The illegitimate son of a father that kept him in secret, Dennick dreamed of becoming a Cathar and vowed to protect the people of Gavany. The Travails destroyed his entire legitimate family, and even long after death, Dennick still raises his shield to defend the innocent from Innistrad's evils. The recurring appearance of the card Unruly Mob has changed only in flavor text across these three sets, and has become another source of comedic relief for me. They feel like the crows on the fence of Innistrad, surviving all the horrors that the world throws their way. Every year around October, I immerse myself in horror media, and it has now become tradition that I make a magic video for Halloween. I must admit, I find a lot of comfort in this genre. I know I'm not alone. As part of my research to understand why I enjoy being frightened, I found an article titled The Paradox of Horror: Fear as a Positive Emotion from 2012. Here, author Katerina Bentanaki writes, arguing from the principle that we can find experiences both unpleasant and perfectly desirable, Smuts traces the attraction of horror and all painful art in the rich experience that it offers. He argues that one is seldom as fully engaged intellectually, perceptually, and affectively as when experiencing painful emotional responses to art. Innistrad to me is a world of comfort fears, a place where terrifying events are happening to people who are decidedly not me and never could be, for reasons that are ridiculous and fantastic and imaginary. I find a lot of joy in watching humans flip into werewolves and swinging into a squad of bloodthirsty vampires. I find being held in suspense alongside a theater of anxious moviegoers to be cathartic and overwhelmingly fun. I find scouring the source material that inspired these sets to be infinitely rewarding. I feel even after writing this love letter to Innistrad that I have yet to scratch the surface of why I enjoy these cards so dearly. But the haunted house must inevitably lead to an exit somewhere. So I'd like to end with this piece from the first set. This is Paraselene by Ryan Yee, the name of a natural phenomenon in which the light of the moon forms a halo and creates a luminous spot in the sky. As we've seen time and again, the moon on Innistrad and in Gothic horror at large often warns of impending doom. Here, however, the full moon seems to provide some serenity and calm, perhaps for the first time ever on this plane. As I often take walks at night to gather my thoughts, I'm enamored by the light of the full moon. I remember that I am staring at the same moon that guided Chopin's hands as he composed his nocturnes. I feel inspired by Leopardi's poems, his love letters to the moon that kept him company, the same moon I see in the sky now. I imagine that somewhere in a far-off land, a bat is taking flight from the arched window of a lonesome castle, A farmer is succumbing to the infernal rage and answering the howl of the beast within. A corpse is desperately clamoring for the blessed sleep to no avail. I imagine what it must have been like to sit down to a warm meal with death incarnate. And I smile. Welcome back in. I hope you enjoyed the debut episode and screening of the Horror of Innistrad. And to answer one question already I see in the chat, yes, I would love to do more of these. This is a test run, more or less, and I hope you had fun. It was really lovely for me to revisit these old videos. I often say that when I'm done with a video, I'm done with it, and I really don't watch it again, if not 6 months, a year, 2 years afterwards. So coming back to this one is always fun because it feels like, oh, I would do some of this stuff differently now, but at the same time, I might not do it the same way. And, you know, I've always kind of liked this video. So like I said in my little essay at the top, it is a full moon tonight. Technically yesterday. This is a waning gibbous now, if you're going to be very technical about it. But if you go on a walk tonight, if you feel inspired, I will do the same after we escape from this live chat. I will go see that same moon that inspired Leopardi, and that inspires so many of the citizens and denizens of Innistrad to change and transform. I think it's kind of enchanting, and maybe there might be some sort of romantic angle we could play here, that you will be looking at the same moon as myself tonight. I've gathered some questions in the chat. I would like to do these pretty quickly. I was taking notes throughout. So we're going to do about 15-20 minutes of this and then call it a night, call it an evening. So Chris Delano asks, if you wanted to do another return to Innistrad, what creative elements of the previous returns would you want to keep, and what would you want to make sure doesn't come back? What I wouldn't want to keep is sort of what we found in Crimson Vow, was just like a tonal shift into, like I said at the front and sort of in the video, I want Innistrad to take itself very seriously. And it works really well when it takes itself extremely seriously and shoots straight down the middle. Like there's no layer of irony in Gothic media, in Gothic fiction. And because of that, you can buy into the threats and relate to the protagonist directly, because there's no deus ex machina of the joke kind of lingering outside. So the more seriously Innistrad takes itself, it's a great plane to take itself very seriously. So something like a vampire wedding can only work if it's under the threat of something else, and not just kind of a sideshow act, if you will. I don't want it to become a circus. And I also would like to keep Hollywood outside of Innistrad. I know I spoke about the cinematic references that kind of populate this plane, but if you're going to lean into the cinematic, I think that the prerequisite has to be the same. Reference movies that also take themselves very seriously. Like there's no joking in Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Like that's a very hard watch, right? The Fly is really, really depressing. It's truly one of the most like unnerving movies I've ever watched. Broad daylight, if you will. There's nothing like in terms of the cinematography that yells at you that it should be a dark and depressing movie, and yet it crushes your soul. So I think if you're going to pull from cinema, at least align with that value. And if not, then push the cinematic references to Duskmourn, which is a much more forgiving and much more contemporary locale for that sort of stuff. So that's what I would push away. And really the premise of the original block, which is everything is hunting you. You are the protagonist and everything is against you. And all of the framing, like I mentioned in the video, Jeremy Jarvis did an excellent job of making sure that any POV shots were to make you feel completely helpless. So I like that idea. Like keep that in the flesh and bones of the world building. Dread needs to be center stage, and then a tiny detail, make sure all of the eyes communicate the tone. Any eyes you see in the humans, go back and look at the art of John Stanko. They're so scared. The dread is visible, and the eyes are kind of the gateway to selling that idea. Chris also asks, what are your favorite Gothic literature or films that you think would be great accompaniment for Innistrad? All of the ones I mentioned, I'm rereading Dracula again, and it's just like, God, like what a tone setter. Like if you want to sort of have your peanut butter and jelly with Innistrad, just read Dracula. Goodness, the first, like, it's an epistolary novel, so it's written in letters. The first few letters are just everything you need. Nosferatu, I loved the Eggers, the recent Eggers one. You can't go wrong with Nosferatu. Read Shelley's Frankenstein. Oh my God, astounding. Here's one that I didn't bring into the movie or into the video, but Interview with a Vampire, I think is kind of visually a perfect match to what Innistrad could be. And there's like a couple of those, illustrations that that I highlighted of Edgar Markov and all that feel yanked out of Interview with a Vampire. The motifs of the reds and the blacks and the opulence, that's just like the height of vampire gold, if you will. Finally, Sleepy Hollow from Tim Burton. We watched that a few Halloweens ago, my wife and I, and it is actually Innistrad the movie. It's amazing. Like, it's everything you would want from an cinematic interpretation of Innistrad. Like, go watch Sleepy Hollow again, and you will instantly be doing the Leo pointing at the screen 10 times, like, oh my God, that's Innistrad. Oh my God, that's Innistrad. So go to Sleepy Hollow. Sean asks, what thematically do you feel is important when trying to convey horror through artwork? I think that it's the same that works in horror cinema. My favorite horror cinema leans into innuendo, suggestion, giving the viewer an out through the imagination, which is so hard to do. Do not show the monster, show the idea of the monster. And I think that all the paintings in Innistrad that work for me are operating along the same lines. It's cooler to paint the idea of the monster than to paint the monster. Understate. The Witch is one of my favorite movies ever. Probably top 5 for me, by Robert Eggers. And that movie is bare bones, extremely understated. It's why like low budget horror movies tend to become cult classics, because you're working with the limitation of something that is limited, Here's a quick reference to a magic card. Go to Ghoul Flesh by Igor Kirluk. That is an understated image. It lets you kind of piece in the details and you fill in what you want with it. It's just a setting, and it's reserved and it's understated, and I think it works perfectly for this. Fluffcopter asks, which creature type do you think was best represented in this plane ludonarratively? A couple nights ago, my Magic group and I, we drafted Innistrad Remastered, which is a set that I could not figure out because it's just mishmash, like, amalgamation of all the previous Innistrad stuff. And I'm used to like drafting in lanes and drafting by reference of what I know in terms of the Innistrad sets. Anyway, it occurred to me again, it reminded me, because I drafted like a blue-white spirits deck, that the Geists, their whole shtick is that they have flash, which is like, ooh, spooky, like, ooh, jump out from the shadows, like, ooh, surprise. I think those kind of work in a fun way. Like, if you have to solve ghosts in Magic, like, make them little tricksy demons that that have flash, and can unlock doors and like go bump in the night. So I think the Geists kind of have a vibe, but ultimately I think it's the humans, because of the artifacts. Like, the artifacts tie in the idea that the whole world is hunting you, but you can use the resources, your tools to fight back. And the humans, at least in the first block, really sold the idea that that the zombies are kind of competing in, which is power in numbers. But the idea of the humans being kind of bound together and giving strength to one another and picking up these random weapons, I think is like, it perfectly works with Magic's game systems. Like, you can imagine like an axe just lying around and a human picking it up and wielding it. It's really hard to do that with cards, but Innistrad works in that regard. So I think humans kind of do that. Enforcer Bittle asks, is there any reason for not playing Bloodborne? It feels like a game that's artistically up your alley. Are you generally not a fan of the Soulsborne genre? No, I really am. I loved Elden Ring. Elden Ring's one of the best experiences I've ever had with a video game. One of my good friends who's also in that play group, Weston, loves Bloodborne and swears by it. It's just a matter of time. Like, I know that once I do it, maybe it's this winter that I finally jump into Bloodborne, because I know I will love it. I just haven't done it. And Elden Ring kind of turned me onto the genre. I'm more of like I love watching other people play video games. I won't do it on Twitch, but like back in college, I loved sitting around the house with the other 3 or 4 people I was living with and just watching people play video games. And I remember vividly watching my friend Taylor play Dark Souls. So, you know, that's my kind of role these days. So if someone lived in my house and played Bloodborne for me, that would be great. That's my next Patreon tier. You can come live in my house and play Bloodborne, and I'll just watch you. All right, 2 of the same sort of questions here. Fugly Duckling 13 and Ren both asked about Duskmourn. Fugly Duckling asks, in the intro you said that magic would be too scared to touch on the themes in Innistrad, like being buried alive. Seriously, go look at claustrophobia. Do you think Duskmourn did an insufficient job of touching on these subjects? And earlier you said that Innistrad couldn't be printed today. Do you think Duskmourn served as a chance for more tech and film references, but also a more approved horror replacement? The abstract to that question, Ren, is yes. And it's also a bit of a yes and no. Like, conceptually, Duskmourn is so awesome. What I wanted to touch on in my video was a lot of what I saw that I knew wouldn't be communicated as well in the marketing and in the world guide and on the cards. Specifically, like the idea of Valgavoth. Like, I want you to go back to when you were a teenager and you felt like the entire world was like against you, like there was nowhere to go. That's kind of the angle that that Duskmourn, the premise of Duskmourn's plot and situation is based upon. That feeling of like omnipotent dread and loneliness that is being a teenager. Like, Duskmourn understood that and manifested that into Valgavoth, like this creature that is living in your house and consuming your teenage daughter's mind against you. That is conceptually so cool and works so well, and it does lean a little bit to the cinematic. You know, you can kind of envision a movie that's sort of based on that premise. But like this house that continues to grow and grow in dread and feed off what is teenage angst. Because teenage angst, if you remember, like looking back, it's ridiculous because high school isn't life. But when you're in it, it feels like the end of the world. And it's really hard to pull that off. So I think Duskmourn understood the assignment in that and made it believable and real and cruel and ugly and like vicious. And the idea of Marina Vendrell siding and talking with Valgavoth, her only friend, you know, like that could be a cliche, but I think it works really well, right? But then at the same time, like Duskmourn sits in this 80s insert thing that I know people have complained about. Sometimes the cynical side in me thinks like, oh, did they build Duskmourn with the idea that maybe they could get a Ghostbusters partnership and have a bonus sheet with obvious Ghostbusters references? Like, was some of that in the directive? Was some of that in the world guide on purpose with that in mind? But then maybe a deal fell through. And I hate thinking like that. Like, I don't want to think about that when I'm trying to buy into a plane and its concepts. So Duskmourn's sort of dissonance, its thematic dissonances with the 80s references and the 80s inserts was well deserved in terms of its criticism. I loved what Ovidio had to say about the technology being a conduit of haunting. That is awesome, and that's kind of what Poltergeist leans into as well. Do that though, like be real with it, you know? I don't know. I just like when stuff takes itself seriously, I guess. And I don't think Innistrad would ever let itself be like, it would never let itself do what Duskmourn did with that layer of kitsch on top. Like, Innistrad doesn't have the kitsch. It does have it in some of the later sets, but that first block had no kitsch to it, which is why it felt so good, right? How about this? Cluis asks, does the block format not lend itself to telling greater stories and storytelling for each plane? Or does a return give enough space to call back to stories that weren't finished? I think about this a lot in terms of our revisits to planes we've been to, and especially ones that had the block treatment. The exception is Kamigawa Neon Dynasty, which I think was the perfect, like the platonic ideal of a revisit to a plane that we've seen, because it sold everything, it did everything well in one block. And I think the antithesis is what we've seen lately. Like, I love Tarkir. I love Tarkir Dragonstorm in terms of its draft, but I think that the fly-by nature of like going back to a plane that we love results in us getting as many references to the first block and the first story and everything we loved about Tarkir 10 years ago as we do developments of something new. Like you kind of had to do some digging you had to read the web fiction, which I highly recommend. You had to really sit with the new changes. You have to find the new changes, or if you just play draft a few times, you recognize like, oh, skirmish rhino, that's a siege rhino reference. Oh, we have both clans and dragons. Ooh, Tarkir is everything I've ever wanted. And you move on. Like, where's the developments there? So I think that like when you condense everything into a single block, and especially for a plane we already have a relationship with, then you run the risk of just like making a block that's about itself rather than a setting where something new can take place and development can happen, you know? And the 3 set blocks, we'll never go back. 2 sets best we can do now, for sure. But if we do a 3 set block, like that's very formulaic. Like a 3-act structure is every story that's ever been told ever. And you know that you're going to run into a bunch of cliches, but think about the first Innistrad block. The first Innistrad block is Act 1, everything is killing you. Act 2, everything is worse. Act 3, hope. And what I want you to do, I almost posted this on Bluesky. Just search on Scryfall, Avacyn Restored. Don't read the cards. Dissociate from your connotation to the cards being bad. Just look. Just use your eyes. Don't read, just look. The sense of hope is so visually strong in Avacyn Restored, and you can only, that's such a payoff. You can earn that sense of hope and release and, oh my goodness, we are saved. The light is finally here. You can only do that if you have 2 sets and 9 months of players just getting oppressed, destroyed, like no hope, no sun. It's getting worse and worse and worse. You're hunted by everything. The sun is never rising. And then finally Avacyn shows up and it's the sun. Wow. You can feel that. You can sense that. Players understand that. And if you're working in a visual medium like Magic, like you have to lean into the gags and the cliches. And in those cliches, you might have innovation. You might have the opportunity to communicate something new, even though you know you're working in a cliche, right? That's what I think the first Innistrad block did really well in terms of its structure. How about this? Here's a fun one. Tyler Lieb. Shout out Tyler Lieb. Love you, sicko. Which position in football would each main Innistrad creature type play? Okay, I don't remember I know I just watched the video, but I don't remember exactly what the actual main creature types would play, so I just listed some creature types. You ready? Humans. Obviously, humans would play quarterback. It's anthropocentrism incarnate. I am the center of the universe. What more do you need from a quarterback? Like, I'm the most important person on the field. Everyone's hunting me. Everyone's criticizing me. I need tools to win. I need to be a tool to win, right? That's humans. Werewolves, all right, think about werewolves. Those are the linebackers when the rules were really loose. Like, you have to go back 20, 30 years, the Ray Lewises of the world. But specifically, like, with like Romanowski 80 shoulder pads, like the comically large Gridiron Gang Adam Sandler movie, like, you know, Waterboy. Those are the werewolves backers for sure. Vampires are wide receivers. They are the divas. They are the fragile, floating, effervescent, beautiful, gorgeous divas that will complain all day until they, you know, get 6 touches and 2 tutties, okay? Vampires for sure are throwing fits and complaining on Twitter and want trades because their team lost by a point, okay? Guaranteed. All right, zombies. Zombies are the 3rd down back that you need for 2 yards. The dude who runs with his head forward. Might even be a fullback, but I think of the Innistrad zombies not as like... The hard part is like the Innistrad zombies I don't think of as fast. I just think of them as dumb and shambling and like... 3rd down back, I need a yard, dude. Just like you have one job, right? That's zombies. And then spirits here. Okay. Spirits, ghosts. Spirits or the New England Patriot safeties playing against Sam Darnold on October 21st, 2019, Monday Night Football. Next question. Here's a fun one from Alternus Dusk. What do you personally think was the scariest zone in EverQuest? I still think of a state of unrest often, but Kithikor Forest caused me legit trauma. My answer is Lesser Feydark, for sure. Lesser Feydark betrays everything that Greater Feydark promises. Lesser Feydark, no matter what level you are, will kill you out of nowhere. There are no rules in Lesser Feydark. You'll be killed by some brownie that is 25 levels above you. You could have the Ranger epic and get killed by the unicorn pacing like Lays. That's the scariest zone in EverQuest, and it's never populated. So Lesser Feydark for sure. All right, a couple more questions. Those are the ones I wrote down. So I'm gonna go from the chat, and then we're gonna kill this. All right, we're gonna kill this. We're going to kill this chat in about 3 or 4 minutes. I hope you enjoyed the show. If you want to go rewatch, I would highly recommend the beginning of this. I wrote a short essay that was kind of reflecting on my this video and my relationship with Innistrad and my relationship with Magic now. So, so go check that out. Enforcer, it says, sorry for confusing the name. It's based on a Bionicle. That's fine. Give me 2 more questions. Give me 2 more questions. Ren asks, do you feel a horror set ought to be mired in doom, or do you think a spark of hope, i.e. a coven of survivors banding together to contrast and add narrative? I don't know. I think Doom is an interesting... I think Doom and Dread are slightly different. I think Innistrad is Dread incarnate. Doom could be... Maybe War of the Spark was Doom. Maybe War of the Spark was Doom. Maybe the Eldrazi are like facing the Eldrazi are Doom. And maybe that's kind of, again, what I highlighted in the video of like, how are the humans of Innistrad ever supposed to even conceptually take down Emrakul? It's like the most impossible, like that is so outstandingly impossible to take down. So I would love a horror set faced on Doom. Like Doom is a different emotion entirely. Dread is suffering, but it feels like you have a chance. Doom is, even if you're as prepared as you could ever be, even in the best case scenario, you have no chance. And that's totally different, you know? Jersh says, is there a Magic set or topic you haven't made a video on? If so, what is it and why? How much time do you got? I've got about 25 years of videos to do. And I'm only one person, so I'm trying my best. Just subscribe to the channel and see what I come up with next, all right? Similarly, Captain Redbeardy just asked the same question. Really, though, like, what's a topic I really want to do? And this will be the last question, and then we'll kill it, okay? A topic I really want to do is Magic translation. People have heard me say that for 10 years now, but I want to do a really thorough investigation on what it takes to translate a Magic card. Talk about teams around the world that have never gotten their flowers. Maybe we know Magic artists. We know Magic art directors. We know Magic game designers. We know Magic marketing team. We know everyone involved in Magic except for the people that print cards and distribute them and the people that translate the cards. These teams are so unknown and their job is immense. And there's such a rich history because it kind of reflects the localization of Magic as well. Like Magic to me is so different. It is something different to all the regions in the United States. If you look at the video that I just did on Oops with Legacy, like Legacy in the Northeast and sort of the Rust Belt is so different than Legacy in Japan. It's so different than West Coast Legacy. The same is true for Magic localization and translation. Like I don't know. That's something I've wanted to do forever. Obviously, I have roots in Italy, and Italy was the first place that Magic was translated to, and it was a huge effort from the part of the Italians who were adamant about bringing Magic to Italy. And there are a few key players in that story. Tiziano Antoniozzi and I, when we did our exhibition for Luca Comics and Games a few autumns ago, we explored what that was like to bring Magic to Italy, but that's a story that I would love to flesh out, and it might just be specifically for Italian Magic. And then you get a bunch of fun trivia, like all the errors that have happened over the years with mistranslations. I saw on Bluesky yesterday, someone was talking about how they have a mistranslated artifact that costs 1 less to cast or whatever, 1 less to activate. And technically it's on the card, so you can play it as such. So that kind of overlaps with the idea of what Richard Garfield used to do. If you know anything about the Richard Garfield altars, where if you saw Richard Garfield, asked him to sign a card, sometimes he would rewrite the rules on the card, and then you would have to play it as such because it's Richard Garfield, you know? So I don't know. That's a topic, like, it would take 6 months and it would take a bunch of people and a lot of resources. And I'm fluent in Italian, but like still I would want some natives involved there. Okay. Hey, listen, thanks so much for joining. Thanks so much for being here. I had a blast. I hope you enjoyed. We're going to do this again. We're going to do this again for a legacy Rhystic Studies video, something that people love that we can rewatch. I'll write some more essays. I hope you're doing well. Get outside, look at that full moon. Thanks for being here.